This presentation outlines the terms of reference envisioned for the Supply Chain Risk Management Assurance Framework project. The terms of reference span scope, purpose, levels of indirection, framework, assurance, risk management, rollout maturity levels, global challenges strategies, and public policy incentives. The scope of supply chains spans technology and innovation, economics and competitiveness, national security, and global challenges strategies. Supply chains are consequential, and their assurance is essential. Adoption of the Supply Chain Risk Management Assurance Framework is voluntary, but may require public policy incentives. The purpose of the Supply Chain Risk Management Assurance Framework is not to prescribe or impose supply chain practice or methods. Instead, the purpose of the Supply Chain Risk Management Assurance Framework is to encourage, stimulate, and incentivize supply chain owners and operators to positively and proactively assure the identification, mitigation, transfer, or acceptance of the sources of risk, problems, and factors that may impede the achievement of supply chain goals and objectives. It is important to understand that the Supply Chain Risk Management Assurance Framework, by necessity, operates under three levels of indirection. First, it is a framework, a basic underlying structure. Second, it promises assurance, a positive declaration intended to inspire confidence. Third, it manages risk through the identification, mitigation, transfer, or acceptance of factors, sources of risk, and problems that may impede the achievement of supply chain goals and objectives. A framework is a basic underlying structure. The Supply Chain Risk Management Assurance Framework focuses on the infrastructure of management, engineering, process, technology, and skills needed to acquire, field, and operate trusted, competitive, and austere software-based supply chains with intelligence and confidence. Assurance promises a positive declaration intended to inspire confidence. Assurance assertions are based on goals and objectives and appropriate indicators, measures, metrics, and analytics. The assurance of an attribute or aspect is specified by an assurance assertion composed of a claim, arguments, and evidence chain. Assurance assertions themselves are subject to validation and verification. An assurance assertion chain is validated when the correspondence between a claim and its argument is shown to be clear and convincing with respect to completeness and correctness. The argument evidence segment of the assertion assurance chain is verified according to the correspondence between the evidence and the argument. Here, 4 levels of confidence for appraising evidence are identified as follows. Number 1, the evidence in support of the argument is insufficient. 2, the preponderance of the evidence supports the argument. Number 3, the evidence in support of the argument is clear and convincing. Number 4, the evidence in support of the argument is beyond the shadow of a doubt. Risk is managed through the identification, mitigation, transfer, or acceptance of factors, sources of risk, and problems that may impede the achievement of supply chain goals and objectives. Supply chain risk management assurance is the application of risk management principles and practices to reduce uncertainty in the assurance of software-intensive supply chains through the use of software-based smart and trusted tactics designed to deliver consequential outcomes in assuring supply chain trustworthiness, security, resilience, coordination, control, and flexibility. Setting goals is the first step in managing risk. Goals are attributes to be assured. Goals associated with smart and trusted software and supply chain risk management assurance include maintaining infrastructure, being trusted, being competitive, and being austere. Objectives associated with goals are factors with consequential outcomes. For example, performance, mission, resilience, innovation, flexibility, efficiency, control, leadership, coordination, and risk. A target organization adopting the supply chain risk management assurance framework, Rollout, is progressively locked in as it advances through the 5 levels of maturity rollout, including Level 1, lack of commitment. Level 2, management commitment, both vision and goals. Level 3, engineered flow control, strategic objectives with consequential outcomes, and factors that serve as sources of risk or problems. Level 4, process risk calculation based on evidence-based assertion argument-driven assurance assessment of sources of risk and problems. Level 5, global challenges strategies, standards-based certification versus tightly controlled indigenous innovation. The global challenge for supply chain risk management assurance is trust. What are the boundaries and limits of supply chain risk management assurance trust? Number 1, to what extent can standards-based certification be relied upon to deliver trust through transparency? This is necessary and sufficient for industry to reach the global boundary of trust. China's strategy of indigenous innovation can be relied upon to deliver trust through regulated internal corporate controls. This is necessary and sufficient for government and military to reach the country boundary of trust. Is the outer boundary of trust the enterprise, the country, or the globe? For government, for military, for critical infrastructure, for commercial industry? Within what boundaries is the trusted chain of custody unbroken? To what level of confidence is the chain of custody assertion backed up by evidence-based assurance assessment? The evidence in support of the argument is insufficient, therefore not trusted. The preponderance of the evidence supports the argument, perhaps sufficient for trusted for government industry. The evidence in support of the argument is clear and convincing, perhaps sufficient for trusted for government and critical infrastructure. The evidence in support of the argument is beyond the shadow of a doubt, perhaps necessary for trusted for military. Achieving maturity in supply chain risk management assurance is an imperative with national economic and security implications. Public policy incentives are needed to encourage and further lock in adoption of the maturity model. The right mix of public policy accords as much self-determination as possible and invokes as little regulation as necessary. Public policy incentives revolve around the following public policy measures. Number 1, market-driven tactics are centered around industry standards, activities, voluntary compliance, and public-private collaboration for information sharing. Number 2, self-help remedies are government-sanctioned, low-cost actions whose practitioners are usually accorded the benefit of a doubt. For example, consider the electronic repossession of a vehicle by satellite signal shutdown after it violates terms of agreement for speed or location. Number 3, targeted investment and funding can be used to stimulate research in critical areas. Number 4, insurance mechanisms can be used to reduce business resistance where unknown or low probability of occurrence of events are involved. Import tariffs on offshore outsourcing have been considered by some. Tariffs would be used to produce revenue to fund domestic software research and education. In addition, tariffs would be structured to even the playing field for the domestic software workforce. Number 6, tax policy, such as research and engineering tax credit, can be powerful, but it is difficult to get all stakeholders on the same page. These include the creators of technology, the users of technology, the legislative community, the legal profession, and the judicial arm. Number 7, guiding regulations are useful as mid-course corrections to achieve policy goals and as clarifications where they are needed, such as export controls and antitrust litigation. Number 8, targeted legislation appears attractive. However, congressional leaders often lack a sufficient understanding of technology and software issues. Here is my contact information. I would be happy to receive questions and have discussions with people on this important subject.